Olympic Mountains, Washington State, February. Winter blanketed every forest path in thick white snow. Winds from Puget Sound howled into the rugged ridgelines, whistling through towering pines as if to remind humankind of its smallness against nature's vastness. Along one narrow trail, a single line of footprints marked the powder leading up to an old ranger station near Hurricane Ridge. Its wooden door hung crooked, its roof rusted. But today, a woman approached it with a resolve in her eyes, as if this place marked either the beginning or the end of everything. Her name was Kathleen Howard, a retired senior ranger from Olympic National Park. At 68, her silver hair tucked beneath a moss-colored knit cap, she still carried the strong, upright posture of someone shaped by decades in the backcountry. In 30 years of service, she had rescued dozens of lost hikers, taught wilderness survival to youth camps, and traversed paths so dangerous no map dared mark them. But never before had she come into the mountains to search for her own family. 3 weeks earlier, her son, Darren Howard, 36, had taken his wife, Emily, and their twin daughters, Harper and Lena, up to the national park for a weekend camping trip. That afternoon, they'd sent her a photo, the four of them smiling in front of Lake Crescent, the kind of crisp, golden mountain image you'd find on a postcard. It was the last time anyone saw them. They never called again. No texts, no pings, no GPS. Their Jeep Wrangler never passed the exit checkpoint. After 72 hours of silence, Kathleen called the local sheriff's office in Port Angeles. A search and rescue operation launched immediately. 10 days later, with helicopters sweeping ridgelines and dogs combing trails, all they found was one thing: absolute silence. No bodies, no tracks. Even the family's car had vanished, as if the forest had swallowed it whole. Deputies from Clallam County believed they'd likely fallen victim to a snowstorm or avalanche. Conditions are too extreme. Chances of survival are slim. The lieutenant told Kathleen during a press conference, "We are suspending the search until further notice." But Kathleen didn't believe it. She had read the clouds, heard the wind, felt the ground shift. She knew her son. Darren had grown up in this park. He wouldn't have taken his daughters up into danger without being certain. He wouldn't have made that mistake. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And so, while the rest of the world began to move on, Kathleen returned to the place where it all began, not as a grieving mother, but as a seeker of the truth. In her backpack was a fresh stack of missing posters. The girls' faces, Harper's shining brown eyes, Lena's gap-toothed smile, stared back like spirits calling out from limbo, pleading to be found. She pinned the first flyer to a lodgepole pine near the Deer Park trailhead. Snow fell gently, silently. Far off, an owl's cry echoed across the canyon. The forest held its breath. And in Kathleen Howard's heart, a certainty clearer than anything she'd ever known took root. Her family hadn't disappeared because of the weather. Someone brought them here, and someone didn't want them found. The February wind in Olympic wasn't like anywhere else. It didn't roar or rage, it whispered, like someone breathing softly against the back of your neck in the dark. Kathleen Howard bent down to adjust the missing poster she had just tacked onto the weathered wooden post at the edge of the near-empty Deer Park trailhead lot. The metal pins stung her cold fingers. On the waterproof flyer, a family portrait. Darren stood in the back, one arm around Emily's shoulders. The twin girls beamed up, front Harper in yellow, Lena in purple identical smiles except for the dimple on one cheek. A young couple had just parked their car. The woman glanced at the poster, then at Kathleen. That look, part pity, part discomfort, quickly masked. Kathleen had seen it dozens of times over the last 3 weeks. She didn't blame them, and she didn't need their sympathy. She wasn't here for comfort, she was here for answers. A familiar voice called from behind, "Mrs. Howard?" Kathleen turned. It was Deputy Carl Dawson, Undersheriff of Clallam County. His eyes looked tired behind his glasses, uniform pants muddy at the cuffs. He approached, carrying a manila folder. "We just got the thermal imaging reports back from the aerial team," he said. Nothing new. A few heat spots, but they're just wildlife deer, bears, maybe a fox. No confirmed signs of people or vehicles. Kathleen took the folder and flipped through the infrared images. Red smudges in a sea of white. Anything could be something. But to the police, if it wasn't a body, it wasn't worth a second look. "Any plans to search the northern range again?" she asked, eyes still on a square of red markings near the tree line. Carl hesitated, then shook his head. No marked trails, deep snowpack, unstable terrain. And he lowered his voice. "Your petition to extend the official search zone was denied this morning." Kathleen folded the map silently. She didn't argue. Carl knew her well enough by now. When she didn't speak, she was most determined. After he left, she stood there for a long while, gazing into the thick evergreens. A thin shaft of sunlight broke through the canopy, glinting off the frost. Then she turned and began walking deeper into the old trail toward the Deer Ridge shelter. This was a trail Darren knew as a boy. He could read the soil, orient by moss, find his way without a compass. He had taught the twins how to tell bear tracks from deer. Emily had less wilderness experience, but she was cautious, methodical. They weren't reckless people. The only reason they would leave their usual route was if someone led them off it. The Deer Ridge shelter appeared after a bend in the path, its low wooden roof nestled into the hillside. Kathleen had visited it many times. But something felt off this time. The door wasn't fully closed. The snow around the porch had been disturbed. Boot prints. Kathleen's fingers tightened around the inside of her coat pocket. She always carried bear spray and a Buck 110 folding knife, not out of fear of people, but from years of ingrained habit. She pushed the door open. Inside, it was freezing. No one was there, but the air still held a trace of warmth and muddy footprints marked the wooden floor. She scanned the room. No fresh coals in the stove, but the bookshelf had been shuffled, and a first aid cabinet hung ajar. She moved toward the guest log on the side table. Flipping through pages filled with scrawled thanks and weather complaints, her eyes caught a new entry. Today's date, and just 2 words in black ink. Still watching. Fresh ink, barely dried. She shivered. Outside, the wind howled again through the canyon, sounding eerily like footsteps in the snow. Kathleen kept her hand near her coat. She locked the door behind her and crossed to the emergency radio mounted by the ranger station wall, a private network still used by retired wilderness staff. Deer Ridge Shelter reporting. Signs of unknown activity, no ID. Requesting confirmation of any personnel nearby. Silence. No response. Kathleen sat on the edge of the wooden bench, her eyes fixed on the tree line beyond the window. Her heartbeat was steady, not fast, but tight as a taut bowstring. She wasn't afraid, but she knew from this moment on she was no longer the only one searching. Something, or someone, was now watching her back. 3:00 p.m. The pale afternoon sun filtered weakly through the western tree line, casting fading slivers of gold over old, scattered boot prints in the snow. Kathleen left the Deer Ridge shelter without marking her presence, an instinct she'd kept from her ranger days. She didn't take the main path. Instead, she turned onto a barely visible cut-through known only to veteran hunters and former rangers, Fisherman's Cut, a narrow, steep descent that linked Deer Ridge to the north slopes of Obstruction Point. A stretch search teams had dismissed early on as too dangerous and unmarked, but that's exactly why Kathleen was headed there. After about an hour, she reached a tree with old initials carved into its bark. O.P. Milhai, shorthand for Obstruction Point, marker 12T. She recognized the spot. Somewhere nearby, a local tracker had once set up wildlife cameras to monitor the movement of wolves. That man's name was Travis Nielsen, a longtime hunter from Sequim who frequently deployed motion-triggered cameras throughout the backcountry. Kathleen pulled out her satellite phone. No signal, but she had Travis's number committed to memory. 3 minutes later, she heard crunching snow behind her. She turned, hand brushing her bear spray. But it was Travis wearing a blaze-orange hunting vest, snow-dusted beanie, binoculars around his neck. "Mrs. Howard?" he asked, catching his breath. "I saw some weird activity on the northern cams. Was heading up to check." "I thought as much," Kathleen said. "You have the reader with you?" "Always," he replied, pulling out a rugged SD card reader. He plugged it into a handheld device, half phone, half field computer. The screen flickered with grainy black and white thumbnails, the cold air making the images blur slightly at the edges. Kathleen leaned in. First frame, a deer trotting past. Next, a small bear. Then, frame 8. Kathleen stopped breathing. Movement, left side of the frame, a woman with shoulder-length hair, wearing a pale coat. 2 small children followed, one in yellow, one in lavender. There was no mistaking it. "That's them," she whispered. "Emily and my girls." Travis zoomed in and pointed to the timestamp. "Look, this was captured 3 days ago, late afternoon, just above Camera 3, near Buckhorn Saddle." Kathleen's heart locked in her chest. "Your son?" Travis asked gently. "He's not in the footage?" She shook her head slowly. "No, either behind or not with them at all. It's a fixed position cam," Travis noted. "Only catches movement directly in front. He could have been off frame." "They're heading east," Kathleen said, thinking aloud. "Away from the official search grid." Travis unrolled a topographical map and pointed. "I can take you there. I know the ridgeline. Lots of gullies and deadfall. There's a dried-up creek, but water's near freezing. Can we go now?" she asked. He hesitated. "Sun's about to drop. If we head out, we'll be bivouacking in the snow." Kathleen glanced at her watch. 4:23 p.m. Less than 90 minutes of daylight left. But she knew too well every hour that passed was one step closer to death out here. "We're going," she said firmly. "I've got headlamps, GPS, and more courage than common sense." Travis gave a tight smile. "Good. Then I won't be going alone." They moved fast, slicing through untouched snow, the narrow beams from their headlamps dancing across frost-covered underbrush. The temperature dipped below 10 degrees. But Kathleen didn't feel the cold, not when it was her own blood she was trying to find. By midnight, they reached the slope where the footage had been recorded. Travis paused beside a large tree, pointing forward. Old Hunter's cabin just past that ravine, last used a few seasons ago, seen folks camp there in fall. Kathleen's breath hitched. A cabin. In weather like this, it could be a refuge, or a trap. "We reach it before dawn," she said. "If they're alive, tonight could be the difference." Dawn broke slowly. After more than 4 hours of trekking through snow, climbing icy slopes, and skirting landslides, Kathleen and Travis reached a narrow ridge overlooking a hidden hollow nestled within a thick pine grove. Their headlamps cut faint beams across the glinting white. It was Travis who spotted it first. "There," he whispered, pointing. "The cabin." Kathleen squinted. A wisp of smoke curled faintly from the chimney. Someone was inside. Her heartbeat surged. The fatigue in her legs vanished. She tightened the straps on her pack and turned to Travis. "We go in slow. I'll take point." "Careful," he warned. "If it's not who we think." "No one else out here wears lavender and yellow jackets in sub-zero temperatures," she cut in. "Those are my girls." They flanked from the right side, keeping low to avoid silhouetting themselves in the open snow. As they neared the cabin, Kathleen motioned for Travis to stay hidden behind a wide cedar trunk. She advanced alone. The cabin was sturdier than she expected. Thick planks, intact windows, and a front door slightly ajar. A child's yellow jacket hung over the porch railing like a quiet confirmation. She swallowed. Stepping onto the creaking wooden steps, she knocked twice, firm but calm. Silence. She knocked again. "Hello? Emily, it's Kathleen." A faint sound behind the door, then the scrape of a wooden latch. Slowly, it opened. Emily stood in the threshold, pale, disheveled, eyes wide with disbelief. Her snow-covered coat clung to her shoulders, her hands trembling slightly. "Oh, God! Kathleen! Is it really you?" Before she could answer, Emily pulled the door wide and threw her arms around her. "How did you know where to find us?" "When no one else looked, I did," Kathleen said, wrapping her arms around her daughter-in-law. Inside the cabin, small feet pounded across the wooden floor. "Grandma Ellie?" Two small figures rushed from behind a curtain. Harper hesitated. Lena ran straight to her, eyes glistening. Kathleen dropped to her knees. The girl's arms circled her neck, cold cheeks pressed into her shoulder. "You really came." She couldn't speak. She simply held them close, afraid to let go, as if they might vanish into smoke and frost. Once settled inside, Kathleen took in her surroundings. The fireplace was burning warmly. Food sat steaming on the table. Shelves were stocked with canned goods, powdered milk, even fresh items like someone had resupplied recently. She noticed it immediately. This cabin wasn't abandoned. It was in use. Emily moved about the small space, fixing warm drinks, her hands still unsteady. Kathleen lowered her voice. "Where's Daniel?" Emily paused mid-step, her face darkened. He left the next morning to get help, after the first storm, but he never came back." "You didn't go after him?" "I couldn't. The girls had fevers, the slopes were iced over. I didn't want to risk losing them too." Kathleen nodded, though her thoughts swirled. Daniel knew these mountains. Why take them into uncharted territory? Why risk it with children? When the girls finally fell asleep by the hearth, Kathleen stood and quietly surveyed the cabin. Behind a shelf was a pantry, unusually full. Firewood stacked high, the medicine kit held fresh antibiotics, not the supplies of a forgotten shack. Someone had been stocking this cabin, recently. "You've been living here for 3 weeks?" Kathleen asked. Emily avoided eye contact. "Yeah, lucky find. Total coincidence." "And Daniel?" Silence. Kathleen stepped toward the table, placing her cup down. Her boot nudged a loose floorboard. Something metallic glinted underneath. She crouched. A man's wedding ring, engraved D.H. Daniel's ring. She lifted it. It was clean. No dust, no scratches, not something that had been dropped weeks ago. "This," she said slowly, standing. "Why was it under the floor?" Emily froze. Her face hardened. "Maybe he dropped it the first night? Hands were cold, maybe it slipped." Kathleen took a step forward, still holding the ring. "Emily, tell me the truth. Where is my son?" Emily's eyes shifted. Cold, calculating. Kathleen never saw the strike coming. She only heard a dull thud, then darkness swallowed her. Kathleen's consciousness returned in broken waves of darkness. Her head throbbed violently. Something warm trickled down her neck blood. She blinked, adjusting to the flickering light. Firelight? Yes, the cabin. She tried to move. Nothing responded. Her wrists and ankles were bound tightly to a wooden chair, rope biting into her skin, cutting off circulation. The room was freezing, but colder still was one feeling: betrayal. Emily was gone. So were Harper and Lena. The fireplace still glowed faintly, but something was wrong. A chemical stench lingered in the air. Kathleen lifted her head. In the shadows behind the stove, she spotted it, a gas canister, its valve slightly open, leaking into the room. She knew immediately, if the gas reached the fire, the cabin would explode. Emily had left her here to die, burned alive, erased. Kathleen's mind snapped into survival mode. She shifted, testing the knots. Sloppy work, a bit of slack. Pain flared behind her eyes, but she pushed through it. She twisted her wrists, leaning forward, using the edge of the chair to grind the rope against the old wood. Every movement sent agony through her skull, but the gas was getting thicker. She could hear the faint hiss. Crack. The rope around her left wrist gave way. She yanked her hand free, fumbled for the knife she always kept clipped to her back pocket, a weathered buck 110 folding blade. Her fingers, stiff with cold, pried it open. From the stove, a pop sounded. A spark. The fire kissed the gas. A burst of flame leapt across the kitchen in a flash of heat. Kathleen didn't wait. She grabbed a log from beside the fireplace and smashed the nearest window. Crash! Shards of glass exploded into the snow. She threw herself through the opening just as fire erupted behind her. She landed face first in the icy powder, wind knocked out of her, blood dripping from her cheek where the glass had sliced her. Behind her, the cabin roared to life, a tower of flame consuming everything. What once seemed like shelter was now a hellscape. She crawled away from the blaze, coughing, body trembling from cold and shock. Her shoulder was likely dislocated, her scalp sticky with blood, but she was alive, and Emily hadn't expected that. Kathleen scanned the tree line. No sign of Travis, no footprints other than a single small trail leading away. She followed. About 30 yards out, slumped near a pine trunk, was a tiny form in a purple jacket. Lena. The girl's eyes were glassy, her breath shallow. One leg was twisted unnaturally. "Grandma," she whispered. "My leg, it hurts." Kathleen rushed forward, cradling the child. Lena's ankle was clearly broken, and she'd been left behind. "Where's your mom? Where's Harper?" Kathleen asked softly. "She said, I was too slow. She said they had to go, said someone had to be left." The girl trailed off, tears streaking her dirt-smeared cheeks. Kathleen didn't cry, didn't rage. She wrapped Lena in her own coat, held her close, and stood. "Your mother left you," she said, her voice like ice. "But I won't." She turned toward the trees, toward the shadows where Emily had vanished, dragging Harper and a trail of lies with her. "I will find you, Emily." The wind howled through the trees like whispers from a forgotten age. Kathleen held Lena's small body tightly in her arms. The girl was feverish. Her hands were cold as ice, her lips pale. The wind cut into them like 1,000 tiny knives, but Kathleen didn't slow. Every minute of rest was a minute closer to death for the child. No map, no GPS, no Travis. Everything had burned in the cabin. All that remained was instinct and resolve. She leaned down, whispering into Lena's ear, "You have to sleep a little, sweetheart. I'm taking you home. Just hold on." Lena nodded weakly, eyes fluttering shut. Kathleen tightened her headlamp and glanced skyward. Westward, downhill. Using the North Star and the outline of distant ridges, she estimated they were still 10 kilometers from the Deer Ridge shelter. Dawn was near, but snow was falling again. She gritted her teeth and moved. 3 hours later, the sky began to bruise with light. A soft orange hue crept across the gray, like a promise that hadn't yet found words. Kathleen spotted a half-buried stone marker along the trail, an old checkpoint etched with D6. A forgotten ranger station landmark. She almost cried. The wind shifted, then a low hum, an engine. Somewhere down the slope, the sound of an ATV. "Help!" she cried, voice hoarse. "Help! I have a child!" The engine cut. Moments later, figures emerged from the tree's uniformed rangers, 4 of them. One ran ahead, Michael Keene, head of the current search unit. Jesus Christ. "Mrs. Howard? Lena, she needs help. Now." 30 minutes later, at the Deer Ridge Ranger Post, Lena was loaded onto a stretcher and airlifted to Forks General Hospital. Kathleen held her hand until the last possible moment. As the helicopter lifted off, Lena looked at her through the window. "You'll come, right?" she whispered. Kathleen squeezed her fingers. "I'll be there, and I'll bring Harper home." As the medevac disappeared into the clouds, Michael turned to Kathleen, his expression dark. "You need to tell me everything, Kathleen. We saw Emily and Harper earlier this morning at the south entrance. She claims you attacked the cabin, tried to kill her." Kathleen stood still, a slow, cold fury rising in her. "She's lying." She seemed panicked, said you'd lost your mind after Daniel's disappearance and started chasing them into the woods. Kathleen reached into her pocket and pulled out Daniel's wedding ring. She held it up to Michael's face. "Where do you think this came from?" she asked. "I found it under the floorboards. Spotless. Daniel's ring. And when I asked Emily, she said nothing." Michael studied the ring, saying nothing. "She left Lena in the forest. Broken leg. Hypothermic. Tried to burn me alive. If I hadn't smashed the window, I'd be dead." A heavy silence stretched between them. At last, Michael nodded, slowly. "I'll call Clallam County. This isn't a missing persons case anymore. It's criminal." Kathleen turned away, eyes locking on the southern tree line where Emily was now fleeing with Harper, dragging behind her a trail of lies and a dead man's silence. She spoke softly, but each word landed like a hammer. "I won't let her get away." 3:30 p.m. Forks General Hospital, Clallam County. The waiting room was eerily quiet despite the faint sound of ambulance wheels squeaking down the hall. Kathleen Howard sat on a bench, a bandage around her head, gauze wrapped around her hand, and ash-stained clothes still clinging to her from the cabin fire. Across from her, Lieutenant Brian Cole, a homicide investigator, took notes in a worn leather pad, stealing glances at her with a mixture of skepticism and concern. "You're saying Emily Whitaker tried to burn you alive?" he repeated slowly. Kathleen nodded. "This isn't a guess. I saw the gas valve open. I heard the fire catch. I smashed a window to get out. And Lena? Left in the woods. Broken leg. No adult in sight." "And her husband, Daniel? What makes you believe he was murdered?" Kathleen pulled a wedding ring from her coat pocket and placed it on the table. "This. I found it under the cabin floorboards. Spotless. No way it had been there for 3 weeks. Daniel's ring. I asked Emily. She didn't answer." Cole leaned forward, eyes locked on the ring. He ran a thumb along the smooth metal before glancing up. "And you're willing to make a formal statement under oath?" "Not just willing," Kathleen said, her voice steady. "I demand it." Tied. Across the hospital, in a private, guarded room, Emily Whitaker sat upright in bed, red-eyed, holding a plastic hospital cup. Harper lay beside her, sleeping against her thigh, but when no one was watching, Emily's expression changed. Sharp, calculating, cold. The door opened. A female detective entered, accompanied by 2 child services staff. One of them gently roused Harper and escorted her from the room for a quick talk. Emily didn't resist, but when the door shut again, her face hardened. "You people again," she murmured with a hollow smile. The detective opened a folder. "Emily, we're investigating serious charges. Attempted murder, child endangerment, and possibly the homicide of your husband, Daniel Whitaker. Would you like an attorney present?" Emily raised her eyes unfazed. "Am I supposed to be scared? A confused old woman with a head wound talking about gas leaks and fire? No witnesses, no body. 2 days ago, you claimed Kathleen chased you through the woods. But today, she carried your injured daughter down the mountain, barely alive. Explain that." Emily took a deep breath, then started crying. The performance was flawless. I panicked. I was afraid of Kathleen. She's been unstable ever since Daniel disappeared. She always hated me. I was just trying to protect my daughter. But the detective didn't flinch. "You know Daniel visited a law firm in Port Angeles recently, don't you? To remove you as beneficiary on his life insurance." Emily froze. "We confirmed it. The new paperwork wasn't signed yet, but a confirmation letter was mailed to your home a week before your family went missing." Her voice dropped to a blade's edge. $2 million, Emily. You knew." Emily said nothing. Her eyes dried instantly. Meanwhile, Kathleen stood outside the operating room, watching as doctors worked on Lena's leg. The glass was fogged, but she didn't move. The surgeon stepped out, removing his mask. "We've stabilized the fracture. She's strong. She'll walk again, but she's going to need months of rehab." Kathleen exhaled. "Thank you, doctor, and please don't let Emily near her, ever again. There's already a temporary protection order. Lena's officially in your custody for now." Down the hallway, Lieutenant Cole was waiting. "We're filing for a provisional arrest warrant," he said. "And you should know, a witness just came forward. A hunter named Travis Nielsen. Says he has something important to confess." Kathleen blinked. "Travis?" "Says he saw Emily push Daniel off a cliff 3 weeks ago, and kept quiet." Kathleen froze. "For money?" she asked. Cole nodded. "Seems likely. But today, he turned himself in. Says he wants to come clean." Kathleen looked out the window, where the gray clouds were breaking just slightly. But there was no peace in her heart, only a quiet, cold fire. Justice for her son. The next day, Clallam County Sheriff's Office, Port Angeles, Washington. Interrogation Room 2. Harsh white light beamed straight down onto a steel table. Travis Nielsen sat upright, hands clasped tightly, uncuffed, but the look in his eyes said it all. There was no going back. Across from him sat Lieutenant Brian Cole and Special Prosecutor Karen Delgado. "Mr. Nielsen," Cole began, "before we begin recording, I want you to understand that your statement may lead to criminal charges accessory after the fact, obstruction, or conspiracy to cover up a murder. Do you understand?" Travis nodded, voice gravelly. "I'm not asking for mercy. I just want the truth to be known. I've stayed silent too long." The recorder clicked on. A long, flat beep, like the start of a confession. Travis started from the beginning. 3 weeks ago, while checking trail cams on the north face of Buckhorn Ridge, he stumbled upon unexpected visitors staying in his hunting cabin, one not listed on any official park maps. At first, I thought about kicking them out, but when I got close, I saw it was a woman and 2 little girls, Emily, Harper, and Lena. Daniel was there too. He said they'd been caught in the storm and asked to stay a night. He said he let them stay out of pity. The girls were exhausted. Daniel had promised they'd leave once the weather cleared, but things didn't go as expected. 2 days later, I came back with supplies. Daniel was gone. Emily told me he slipped and fell, but something was off. Her eyes, she wasn't scared. Her face wasn't grieving. Travis clenched his jaw. Then, quietly, I didn't believe her. I followed the tracks, and then I saw it happen. He inhaled deeply. Daniel and Emily were arguing near a cliff. I hid behind the trees. She screamed, "If you leave us, I'll destroy everything." He stepped back. She shoved him hard. He fell. Silence gripped the room. Cole asked, "Why didn't you report this immediately?" Travis lowered his gaze. "Because I was a coward. Because I was stupid." She came back to the cabin. I confronted her. I wanted her to confess, but instead, she made me an offer. "How much?" Delgado asked. "She said Daniel's life insurance was worth $2 million. If I helped keep it quiet, never told the cops, she'd give me a cut. Enough to retire." I said yes. "And you provided her with supplies?" "For almost 3 weeks. Food, medicine, firewood. I cleaned the tracks around the cabin, made it look like they were just stranded victims. But—" He swallowed hard. "She started acting strange. I overheard her talking on the sat phone. She said I might become a liability. I got scared, especially when I saw her leaving the mountain with only 1 child." "And that's when you met Kathleen?" Cole prompted. Travis nodded. "She was posting missing flyers. I knew she was the mother. I wanted to come clean. But I didn't have the guts. I showed her the camera footage, hoped she'd find the rest herself. I didn't think Emily would go as far as trying to kill her too." "Do you have proof?" Delgado asked. "I had a hidden camera near the cabin security footage. It shows Emily sneaking out at night with a gas can. I also saved sat phone messages she sent. She didn't know I was recording." Delgado leaned forward. "Are you willing to turn over everything?" "I'll hand it all over. No lawyer. I let a good man die. He was my friend. I'll accept whatever comes." "Sure." 2 hours later, Kathleen sat in the prosecutor's office, clutching a cup of hot tea. "This testimony," Delgado said, "along with the camera footage and financial evidence, is enough to charge Emily with first-degree murder." Cole added, "Also, attempted murder, destruction of evidence, insurance fraud, and child endangerment. We'll move on the arrest warrant tonight." Kathleen raised her eyes. Her voice was calm, not bitter, not trembling, just absolute. Do it. 8:00 a.m. 2 days later. Fog hung thick around Forks General Hospital. But the chill inside came from something else, the morning of an arrest. In room 306, Emily Whitaker picked at her breakfast, pretending to eat. Her eyes darted toward the door every few seconds. Harper was gone, transferred to temporary protective custody. Emily didn't know that yet. A knock. Before she could respond, the door swung open. Lieutenant Brian Cole stepped in, flanked by 2 sheriff's deputies. One of them reached for handcuffs. "Emily Whitaker," Cole began, "you are under arrest by order of the Clallam County Court for the following charges: first-degree murder, attempted murder, insurance fraud, child endangerment, and obstruction of justice." Emily shot up. "This is abuse of authority." "You have the right to remain silent," Cole continued, voice even. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." She turned to the female deputy, eyes flashing. "I want my lawyer, right now." "You're entitled to one," the deputy replied calmly, snapping the cuffs into place. For the first time in the 3 weeks, Emily's face betrayed something she couldn't control. She was escorted down the hallway past murmuring nurses, patients, and a few reporters who'd caught wind of the arrest overnight. That afternoon, Clallam County Sheriff's Department, interview room 4. Emily sat across from the table, face powdered, eyes trying to hold their usual control. Across from her, not Cole, not Delgado, but Kathleen Howard. She had requested to be there, and the prosecutor had allowed it a non-formal confrontation, just her and the woman who destroyed her family. The recorder was running. Emily looked at her and gave a cold, amused smile. "So, still not done chasing ghosts?" Kathleen didn't respond immediately. She placed something on the table. Daniel's wedding ring. Did it fall off his hand, or did you hide it under the floorboard? Emily said nothing. Kathleen continued, her voice low and unwavering. "He was going to remove you from the insurance. He was leaving you. He knew you were cheating." Emily's eye twitched, but still no words. "You pushed him off the cliff," Kathleen said, each word like a nail. "And then you staged a survival story. But your biggest mistake—" She leaned in, eyes locked on Emily's. "Was letting me live." Emily narrowed her eyes. "I didn't mean to kill you," she muttered. "I just wanted him gone. Daniel betrayed me. You think he was a saint? He had someone else. He was going to take everything from me. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not him, not you, not anyone." "You left Lena in the snow," Kathleen said flatly. "And you dragged Harper into your game like a pawn." Emily scoffed. "They'll forget. Kids forget fast." Kathleen didn't reply. She stared at the woman who chose murder over walking away. The door opened. Cole entered. "This interview's over. Emily, you'll be held without bail pending trial." Emily screamed. "You can't do this. I'm their mother." "Not anymore," Kathleen said as she rose. "You're just a defendant, and I'll raise them without you in their memories." That evening, the hospital, Kathleen walked softly into Lena's room. The girl was awake, leg in a cast, coloring with crayons. "Grandma," she whispered, "where's Mom?" Kathleen sat beside her, brushing her hair gently. "She's in a place where grown-ups go when they do bad things," she said softly. "But you don't need to be afraid. I'm here now, and Harper will be home soon." Lena looked up, her big brown eyes fragile but steady. "You promise?" Kathleen nodded. "I promise." 3 months later, Clallam County Courthouse, Port Angeles, Washington. Courtroom 1 was full. Behind the rows of benches sat reporters, locals, and former colleagues of Daniel from Olympic National Park. They weren't here out of curiosity, but out of a shared need for truth. At the defendant's table, Emily Whitaker sat still in a pale gray prison uniform. Light from the tall windows fell across her tightly bound hair and expressionless face. No more tears, no more performance. Just a woman who had lost everything and now faced the law. Across the aisle, Kathleen Howard sat upright. Her hands gently held those of Lena and Harper, the twin girls now officially under her legal guardianship. Harper sat closest, her eyes occasionally drifting toward her mother, not with longing, but with a quiet, indescribable distance. Ahead of them, the jury entered. A bell chimed. The trial began. 3 days of arguments, 21 witnesses, 4 video clips, 36 pages of testimony. Every detail of the staged disappearance, the insurance motive, satellite messages, and cabin surveillance footage was laid bare. Prosecutor Delgado closed her statement with one line: "No one caught in a snowstorm hides a wedding ring under a floorboard." The defense had only one tactic left: to paint Emily as emotionally unstable, a desperate mother who panicked during a marital collapse. But the final blow came from Travis Nielsen, who described in precise detail the moment Emily shoved Daniel off a cliff and the blood money that followed. The twin daughters' presence silent, Brave spoke, louder than any word in court. After 5 hours of deliberation, the judge returned. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor. In the charge of first-degree murder, how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty." Emily said nothing. She looked toward Kathleen and then lowered her head. 2 weeks later. A quiet cemetery on the outskirts of Olympic National Park. Kathleen stood before a freshly carved gravestone. The granite read, "Daniel Howard, 1986 to 2024. Father, son, steward of the wild. Kindness leaves a trail deeper than footprints." She rested her hand on the stone, breathing in deeply. Behind her, Lena and Harper played under the tall pine trees. No one spoke, but the golden evening light stretched long across the grass like a silent benediction. Summer came. Kathleen's small cabin outside Sequim now echoed with children's laughter. The 2 girls, inseparable, had returned to school. Lena, still walking with a crutch, raced Harper down the gravel driveway. They called Kathleen Grandma, but sometimes whispered between themselves, "She's kind of a superhero." Harper had once asked, "Do you think Dad knew how much we loved him?" Kathleen replied, "He did, and he always wanted you to live a life with no darkness in your hearts." Every night, before turning off the lights, Kathleen passed their room to check on them, always sleeping peacefully. Then she returned to her room, opened an old wooden chest, and lifted a small tin box. Inside were Daniel's final belongings, his faded Ranger ID, a worn topographic map, and his wedding ring. She didn't wear it. She kept it, as one keeps a mother's last promise. "My son, I will bring the truth into the light, and I will protect your daughters with everything I have left in my heart."